Welcome to the Startup Grind.
All right, kind of gather around here. I want to make sure everyone gets up close. So, bring some chairs. Move up as far as possible so you can hear. Everyone hear from back there. All right, good. So both Jack and I will have mics to be able to have him get his thoughts across as I ask questions. All right. Anyone that doesn't know me, my name is John Muller. I'm actually fairly new to Kalamazoo. I've been here for about a year. I'm a professor at Western Michigan University in the management department teaching entrepreneurship. My focus is on innovation as well as entrepreneurial finance. So it'll be interesting to see what we talk about here with the venture capital world and how that compares to angel investing as well as some crowdfunding that you're seeing there. So Jack probably has some comments about that as we move along here. So first of all, thanks for coming. This is actually the first Startup Grind Kalamazoo event. Startup Grind was actually started about 3 years ago in Silicon Valley by Derek Anderson. He was an employee of EA Sports and decided to go out and start his own company and actually did that and then said, hey, I need to learn some things from other people. So he actually put together this talk, this fireside interview event, and there's actually 50 cities that have a startup grind in it. Kalamazoo now is one of them, so that's very good. And it's actually in 20 countries, and they actually did 250 events last year. All right, so and this year, Startup Grind actually partnered with Google for Google Entrepreneurs, so it's actually getting some headway here. So it's nice to be part of that initiative by Google, and Derek has done a great job as well as the other 49 or so cities. Before we get going, I want to thank Jen for hosting us here at Maestro. There's one thing we want to talk about is make sure you keep drinks off the pool table. All right, so that'll be good, right? All right. Another person I want to thank is the Victorian Bakery, who actually made the cookies, and then my wife, who actually made the rest of the food. So hopefully you make sure you eat all the food. So thank you very much. I also want to thank Mohammed for handling a lot of logistics for this evening. All right. Before we get going, I also want to say that Startup Grind is not the only activity in the startup community here. We're also seeing the Startup Zoo, we're seeing Pitch Zoo, we're seeing the Kalamazoo Business Book Club, and other activities start. So it's really neat to see the startup community actually start to take some legs here within the last year or so. So if you guys have any events you want to start, let's see them get going. So that'll be good. So for our first event, we actually have Jack Ahrens. Jack is actually a venture capitalist, right, with TGap Ventures. He founded it with his co-founder, who's actually here, Peter, as well. So before we get going, let's make sure we give Jack a big welcome here. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to ask questions, and he's going to try to answer them, right? So, and if he starts to blush, okay, that means to ask a good question. Or actually, he's going to point to his partner. His partner's going to answer the question. All right, and then after about 30 or 45 minutes, we'll actually open up the floor. So if you guys have any questions, that is the time when you get to ask them. So, all right, I'm going to give you a grapefruit question. All right, so what do you do, Jack?
Have fun. We invest in early stage companies, not exclusively, but predominantly in the medical area, but we also do software, especially staffing companies. And we go in as equity investors. We're not debt investors. We don't loan the companies money. We're actually buying stock. So we try to go in basically at the same level that the entrepreneur is. If you make money, we're going to make money, and vice versa. We're all equity investors.
And how do you do that? How do you actually make money?
Building them up and selling them. And that's one of the critical things with a venture-backed deal that differentiates a lot of people from whether they're really right for venture capital or not. We see a lot of companies that can be very successful in the long term, but it doesn't do us any good unless we can actually sell the company. And we get all of our money from other investors. They want their money back, and so the only way we can get that is through a liquidity event. And so if you're trying to build a business for the long term, or you want to pass it on to your kids, or you want to retire there in 30 years and have a legacy, you're probably not right for venture capital. We have a saying that if you can afford to buy us out, we probably both made a mistake. We want to try to build companies that are really large, and you're going to make a boatload of money, and we will. And we usually make them sometimes we take them public, but that's a long shot, especially in the last 10 years. Generally, we end up selling them to a bigger company.
So they're acquisition. What stage of the company do you actually invest in? Is it actually pre-revenue, or is it actually they're actually making revenue?
It's usually pre-product. Yeah, especially in the medical stuff. I've altogether been involved with close to 100 companies over my career, and a year ago I did the first company that had FDA clearance before we invested in it. So they actually had a product and were selling. Most of the time, they're just beginning animal studies. So we're in them long before they get into the first humans. So it's a medical company. I've had them go 8-9 years without even having any revenue, trying to get through the FDA process.
8 or 9 years.
Now the plan only said 5, but
so when they pitched you, they said 5 years basically. So, all right. All medical companies?
No, we have a whole variety. Over my career, I've done everything from medical devices to computers, large mainframes, supercomputers, software. My partner does a lot on the software and the especially business side. So we try to have a diversified portfolio.
Can you give us 1 or 2 examples of companies that were successful and 1 or 2 companies that were not successful as an exit?
Yeah, we've had in our funds here that we've had in Kalamazoo. We started the fund down here in 2002. We've had 2 very nice successes. One was called Minute Clinic, which started the whole retail-based clinics that you see around now in a lot of Walgreens and CVS's. Minute Clinic started that whole industry. We were the original institutional investor in that one. We built that up and sold it to CVS, and that's what CVS has now in a lot of their drugstores around the country. So that was successful. Another one we had was right here in Kalamazoo, and it was a combination of it. We don't do drug deals typically, but this was what we thought was mostly a device. It turned out the FDA thought it was mostly a drug. It was a combination thing, but we got into that. It was developed by a guy here in town, a doctor, and run by a very successful entrepreneur. And he sold that to a Canadian public company.
What was the name of that company?
It was a company called Medica.
Now, going back to your fund, you had to raise a decent amount of money to put money into these other companies. So you had the Minute Clinic that was sold to CVS. How long did it take to go from basically raising your fund to investing in Minute Clinic to actually seeing an acquisition by CVS?
Minute Clinic, I think, was our second investment out of the first fund. I believe, yeah. It took us about a year and a half to raise the first fund. The first fund was $20 million. We spent a fair amount of time trying to warm people up before we got into it. It was a difficult time to raise money. Pete and I, even though we'd worked together, it was an entrepreneur and me as a venture capitalist, we hadn't had a fund together, so we reviewed what they call a first-time fund, so that makes it harder to raise funds. Plus, to even make it worse, is our first real meeting was on September 11th of 2001. So we got off to a real good start. But we finally got that fund raised $20 million. And then we invested in 9 companies in that fund.
So to kind of give a educational viewpoint on this. By the way, Startup Grind, there's 3 main points that Startup Grind is about. One is education, one is to inspire, another one is to connect people to see in this room. So those are the 3 goals of Startup Grind here. So basically, a $20 million fund, you invested in 9 companies. So did you actually put $20 million in those 9 companies?
No, in fact, we still have some money available. We're still investing out of that fund. The way venture capital works is you get your commitment for the total amount, you take the money down as you need it to invest in companies. And we average between 5 and 6 rounds of financings in a company. And so even today, we've only drawn down 90% of that money. And some of the money goes to covering management fees and things, but we can recycle the cost basis of the deal. So when we sell something, if we want, we can take the cost basis and reinvest that later if we have to.
The Entrepreneur for a Minute Clinic, how did you meet them?
But when we back to the original ones.
So things change over time then?
Yeah. Yeah, it started out actually, I was doing a focus market research deal in Minneapolis when I lived up there. And founders were in pitching their whole concept, trying to figure out how they were going to market it. And so it paid this marketing company to have a focus group. Sort of liked what they were doing, but I thought their business model was just terrible. And told them I thought they'd be out of money in probably 6 months. And it took them maybe a little longer than that, but I didn't invest in it at that time. I didn't like the model, and the entrepreneurs just didn't seem to have CEO characteristics. Then after I moved down here and we started TGap, in the meantime they had brought in a gal that was a very seasoned CEO, had been involved with a number of companies, and changed the whole business model. And in that case, they ended up firing the 3 founders. They were really dysfunctional. They could never agree on anything. And you always knew the vote was going to be 2 to 3. You just weren't going to sure who was going to be on the 2 side and who was going to be on the other side. And so they just couldn't get anything done. And so Linda got rid of all 3 founders. So they still stayed as equity holders, but were out of the company. And then she started to build a management team. And that's when we invested. It was around her. So we ultimately also got rid of. When we took it to the next stage. She was great at starting the company up, but when we were ready to go do a national rollout, she had never had that kind of experience.
So how does that relationship work then when you have to actually let go of somebody because they don't have the skills to take the company to the next level?
Usually, when we do it, they go into a different position within the company that's more suitable. In Linda's case, because she was brought in from the outside to begin with and wasn't a founder of the company, she was more of what we call a hired gun. But she stayed on the board and stayed active with the company at the board level. But then we brought in a real seasoned CEO who, all things that turned Wendy's, or not Wendy's, one of the other hamburger joints. Arby's. Turned Arby's around, which you wouldn't think would have anything at all to do with a medical company, but he understood the national rollouts and what it took, the kind of infrastructure to have.
Has he stayed with the company after the acquisition was by CBS?
Yeah, he stayed with it for about 2 years. And that was actually part of the deal with CBS, is they wanted him to stay involved. And as soon as his time was up, he was out of there. And entrepreneurs just don't like working for real big companies.
Well, speaking of entrepreneurs, what type of characteristics do you actually look for when you're hearing them pitch about their business idea?
The main thing we look for is really a commitment and a passion for the business. MinuteClinic was a little bit different, where we invested in a very early company with a hired gun, and normally we are really trying to invest in somebody that's got a passion and wants to start the business, and can really see down the road of where he can take it. And we look for commitment from that standpoint. Normally, entrepreneurs don't have a lot of money that they can put into a company, so we're not looking for a lot of cash commitment. We just want blood, sweat, and tears.
So you don't have to show it by putting money into it, but you show it by in terms of your time you put into the company.
Yeah, it's what we call sweat equity. Just a lot of cases. Entrepreneurs, they always have some money in the deal because they try to get it started before they go out and raise money to get a prototype or do something. So
how do you show someone that you have passion about your business?
It's I don't know if there really is a right answer. It just, it comes across when you're talking. I mean, you know, we talk to enough entrepreneurs and look at enough business plans that you can usually tell pretty quickly whether somebody's blowing smoke at you. I mean, everybody's smart enough. They know what we want to hear. And so, you know, we're always sort of judging, are they answering these questions the way they know I want to have them answered, or do they really believe in it? And that's one reason why I think it's, you know, important that, you know, Pete and I were both, you know, in the same offices, because we do things in such early stages. You know, there's not a lot of technology out there to develop, so you're really banking on the people. And so it's nice to work together and get feedback, because, you know, everybody reacts a little differently to something that people say, and trying to get a caliber on them and a bearing and make sure that they're really sincere.
The classic question is the horse versus the jockey in the venture capital world. And basically, I mean, betting on the person, the management team, versus the business idea or the market. What would be your answer to that question? The horse or the jockey?
No, in our case, it's clearly the jockey. Like, some venture capitalists are different. We all invest at different stages of the company. If you're doing a lot of late stage investing where you've already got the business, you know, then, you know, the horse is probably more important because you can find a hired gun that's really run a big company before. When you're at at companies that are at the stage that we're investing in, you know, we don't know whether the company's going to go this way, or this way. All we know is that whatever the business plan says is probably wrong. And so you want to be able to have a, you know, management team that you think can adapt to changes.
Being flexible is a good trait to have for an entrepreneur.
Very dangerous not to be flexible. It gets you into a lot more trouble. I had a deal when I was up in Minneapolis, and it was a laser technology for doing angioplasty, cleaning out the arteries. And the founder of that thing was just absolutely convinced that it had to be a 305 nanometer wavelength laser in order to do what he wanted. And we spent $20-some odd million chasing that rabbit, and it turned out that was not the right wavelength. And he was just sure everybody else was wrong, and he was right. So you've got to have somebody that's willing to finally back off and say, listen, you know, I'm wrong, we're going to make a change. We have to make a change.
Can an entrepreneur be too flexible?
Yeah. He's got one of those right now. Yeah, we were talking about this just today, in fact. You know, we've got a company that, you know, we really like the guy running it, but he's just not putting a stake in the ground. He's trying to do everything by, you know, consensus and, you know, going back to the board all the time and you know, well, is this how you think I ought to do it and stuff. We don't want to run the company. And, you know, we want you to run the company, and we expect the management to run the company. And we want the board to set the policy and work with you on setting the direction. But when it comes to making operating goals, that's what we're backing. And so if you've got a guy that is just too malleable, I mean, that may be fine to, you know, to get along with and talk with, but it's usually tough to build a company that way.
You don't have the foundation that you want to build on.
Right.
So going back to how you meet these entrepreneurs, you know, people talk about pitches. What would you recommend to entrepreneurs in terms of how to do a good pitch? Can you give us examples of bad pitches?
Yeah, the thing you want to cover in the pitch, you got to figure out, first off, you've only got, if you're doing like an elevator pitch at a competition or something, anywhere from usually 3 to 5 minutes to make the pitch. And that's what we call a setting the hook. There's no way you're going to cover all the aspects of the business in that period of time. And don't try to, because you end up spending way too much time on the technology and not enough on the business side of it. Or spend way too much time on the business side not having a clue what you're trying to sell or what the problem is. And so, you know, when you're given a pitch, you want to cover, you know, what the pain is in the marketplace that you're trying to solve. You want to, you know, go over the technology. You clearly want to talk about the management of the company. You want to talk about the business model, and then you want to talk just very briefly about, you know, why would somebody want to buy this down the road. And you just got to kind of balance it out when you cover all those items. So often, if it's a technical guy that started the company, they get so wrapped up in the technology, they just spend, the whole time, and we've got relatively short attention spans. And so, if you blow through the first, 20 minutes of talking just technology and don't get into the marketplace, one, you've gone beyond our capabilities. We don't care that much about the technology at that depth in the early stages. And secondly, you've just lost me, and I can't relate it to the business. So you've got to have a nice balance in there. Great example, I don't know if anybody was in here, was at Fish Bio last week. And they had 9 companies making presentations there. And one of them happened to be by a guy that I've known for a long time since I've been here in Kalamazoo. He starts out with his first slide. He's got the technology in the middle and all these arrows going out to balloons. He had about 15 balloons about totally unrelated markets where this platform was you go after. And he's going on and on and on, and I'm thinking my eyes are starting to glaze over. And then he, highlights the slide, and there's only 2 arrows that are all highlighted. He says, but these are the areas we're going to focus on. I thought, great. So then he starts talking about the business, way too much into technology. He never once told us how he was going to make any money or how he was going to sell this. Then he finishes up his last slide, comes back with the same thing with all these balloons about all the things he's going to solve. And, I told him, he wasted probably 25% of his time on those 2 slides and 75% of my attention span. And so when you always have to keep in mind that you've got to cover all the topics, those 5 topics, pretty succinctly in a short period of time.
Was this person pretty experienced that was presenting?
Yeah, that's what really surprised me. But I think the difference there was he's very technically oriented, and I think that's why he got all wrapped up in the technology. And you can see the vision. I mean, there's no doubt this guy has the passion, but you clearly needed a business guy to wrap around him. And he could just see all the different applications for this technology. Nobody's going to invest in that.
So once you've said, okay, I'm going to look at this company further, so they set the hook, as you put it. How do you go about doing the due diligence after that?
Well, the first thing we'll try to do is we'll sit down with the entrepreneur and spend a fair amount of time with them just trying to build up a rapport, because this is going to be a long-term working relationship. And if we can't get through that part, there's not much sense in getting too excited about the technology. The biggest mistake that as venture capitalists we make is fall in love with the technology and think we'll figure out some way to fix all the other problems. It usually doesn't work that way. And so I refer to it as beer time. Just sit down casually and really try to get used to the person and working with them. Then after that, then we start looking at the the technology, and we don't get real hung up on IP as such. I mean, we want to make sure that it's something that's pretty unique. Some firms will spend a ton of money doing patent work, and to me that's great. But I don't think I've ever had a patent save me any money before. And the one company where I have had a massive patent suit, we've had a patent that was issued. Another company came and got it invalidated. So we thought we were home clear on that one, and spent a boatload of money trying to defend it, and then ultimately got it set aside. It was invalidated. So we don't. We'll get some advice on the patent stuff, but we won't spend a lot of time on it. Again, our feelings are that you've got the right management. If an issue comes up, he'll figure out a business way around it. That's in the industries that we're in. That's why we don't get into drug stuff because their patents are very, very critical. Companies are going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars developing a drug, and then they'll fight the tooth and nail on that. And we don't do a lot of consumer stuff because that's so easy to get into patent stuff. But if you've got a good business idea, and most of our software things that we do don't have patents. It's just know-how and getting to the market and understanding the business. So we'll spend time on the technology. Then we start spending time on the business model. How are you going to be able to make money? If you've got a product. I don't want to pick on you too bad here, but it costs almost as much to make as it does to sell. You've got a problem. You've got to figure out a way to make sure that you can make money at it. Especially in our medical devices, we usually core cost for the unit itself, and then we'll have a disposable cost in most of the things that we do. And if there's some kind of a machine that runs it, and it's an upfront capital cost, we're not quite as concerned about that in the margins because we want to make it all on the disposable, the razor blade theory. So we'll spend a fair amount of time starting to get into the business model and how long it's going to take the company to get it down. We know the margins are going to be crummy early on just because of small numbers. Can you get the margins down to something that where we can make really good money?
You've been talking about medical companies. You have one company called In Stadium in your portfolio. How did you do the due diligence on that?
Well, a lot of it there, we had a really good entrepreneur who really had a passion for sports. He came out of the media. He understands that side of the business. He's been involved with other media type things.
Explain the company real quick so everyone knows what that is.
Well, initially when we first got into the company, they had exclusive rights with a lot of NFL stadiums to put advertising in the bathrooms. Now, it doesn't sound real sexy, but it led itself to some pretty creative things because there's not too many places where you can be gender specific on your advertising. And so it gave a lot of companies some pretty clever things that they could do, in the women's bathroom that you wouldn't necessarily want to put on a billboard out on Main Street here. And the same thing in the guys' restrooms. So you're able to get some specialty there. The guy that had started the company had just incredible, it's amazing the details and the specifics that people know about restrooms in sports venues. I mean, they know how many times you're going to go to the bathroom during the baseball game. They know how long you're going to be standing in line. And I mean, they've got everything down. It was a pretty interesting concept. Since then, the company has really expanded. They brought in a very seasoned digital marketing guy now, and are rolling it out to all the digital media within the stadiums. And they're up to 600 stadiums now?
I think so.
So it's not just NFL then?
No, it's they're getting into colleges and baseball, basketball.
How long have you been in the company?
8 years. It's been that long. Wow. You got to answer tough questions.
So that goes back
Did I
to...
get to get a ticket to any one of the games?
Has the entrepreneur taken you out to dinner yet?
Nobody's taking Pete out loud.
So if you've been there for 8 years, this goes back to the venture capital model of how long your funding on a fund will actually be open, so you have to return back to the partners. So where does that make you sit in regards to saying how you're going to exit out of this venture?
Well, one thing is I've had now 5 partnerships plus 1 evergreen fund in my career.
Explain it evergreen real quick.
The first venture fund that I ran was what they call an SBIC, which was a corporation, and it was a subsidiary of a manufacturing company. And so we didn't have to return the money. We just kept rolling it over. So theoretically, with a corporation, it would go on forever. But the most common format for venture capital is a limited partnership. And you go out and you get commitments from people. And in our first fund, it was $20 million. So people committed to give us $20 million as we needed. And industry standard is it's over a 10-year period. That's one of the biggest lies in the business. These funds are never over with in 10 years. And so when we started ours, we set ours up as a 12-year fund right at the outset with 3 one-year extensions. So we're set up to run 15 years. And so we take the money down, and then we give it away. At one time, our investors were net zero in the fund. After Athletica and Minute Clinic, we had drawn down half the fund, and we paid back half of it. So right now, we've drawn down 90% of the total fund.
It makes it easier to go to the investors when you're actually a couple of successes, right?
Oh yeah.
So how was it to actually handle the no's when you were out there during September 11th trying to raise $20 million?
There were a lot of times where I was trying to say, now, why did I move here from Minneapolis to be unemployed? But it's part of the game. It's the same thing as entrepreneurs. Get used to it, guys. You're going to hear a lot more no's than you're going to hear yeses. And it's no different with raising money. And if you can't handle rejection well, go find a different business.
Speaking about coming here from Minneapolis to Kalamazoo and having a venture capital fund based here, there's not many venture capital funds here in Kalamazoo, would you say?
No, not too many.
How many?
Well, right now there's one.
And who would that be?
Us.
So why aren't we seeing more investors and venture capitalists and angels in Kalamazoo and in Southwest Michigan?
One of the reasons, I think, and you're starting to see a little bit more activity pick up, there's a couple venture firms in Grand Rapids now. You've got another one that's just announced a few weeks ago, it's getting started here. Kevin McLeod starting a medical device fund. Oh, no, I take that back, there's two. There's also Southwest Michigan First Life Science Fund is here too. But it takes a while, and part of the issue is, I think, the same thing we have with trying to find companies and stuff on this side of the state versus, say, Ann Arbor. This is a lot more conservative section through here, the Grand Rapids, Holland, Zeeland, Kalamazoo, Battle Creek. And so it's harder to find the right entrepreneurs. It's harder to find people that really want to get into venture capital. That's starting to change. I mean, we've had a lot of real successful companies here, but if you look around, a lot of them, like the Amways and things like that have been successful without raising outside money. And so we don't have a lot of the role models here that you've got on the over on the Ann Arbor area, or that you have in Chicago or Minneapolis or someplace. But as we start getting more and more companies that are successful here, that's just going to snowball and make it easier. And venture capitalists, a lot of them will try to cover a much bigger territory or nationally. And face it, it's not easy to get in and out of Kalamazoo. When we started this fund, our whole intent was to stay in the Midwest, and we were thinking wind chill time and stuff. So that makes Kalamazoo really logical. We're a few hours to Indianapolis, an hour to Grand Rapids, a couple hours to Chicago, Detroit. There's a lot of people in the area that we can drive to very easily.
Well, do you think the VC should come first, or the investors come first, or the entrepreneurs in building a startup community?
I guess you sort of have to have the answer. I mean, it's all kind of a chicken and egg problem, but venture capital, if you've got the right idea, will come in. I mean, people aren't going to say, if you've got a great idea, they're not going to say, I'm not going to invest in you because you're in Kalamazoo. Some of the guys in the Bay Area might say that just because it's too difficult to get here. We typically have monthly board meetings, and if I've got to spend 3 days getting back and forth to a board meeting, one day at the board meeting, a day getting there, and a day getting home, it makes it pretty tough to justify the time. But there's enough venture capital around the Midwest, and there's going to be a lot more. So I mean, they all kind of go together. But the biggest problem we have is not so much money here in the Midwest. It's finding the entrepreneurial talent.
So, can you give us one example of a unsuccessful investment that everyone can learn from here?
Well, the one would be the laser company that I talked about earlier. Staying, the guy was just going to go this way, come hell or high water, and just, wouldn't bend. And by the time, the board was able to figure it out, it was too late. We'd gone through a lot of money. Another one, I've had one deal that was just, it was a crook. You can't get around that. And the guy just got into starting to embezzle some money and succeed, and there's so much of it is in the mind, not in the notebooks. It made it really tough. We never did recover from that.
Yeah, that's too bad then. So how would you coach those entrepreneurs, other than the one that was a laser company that wasn't coachable, basically? How do you go about coaching them and other than beer time?
Well, the biggest thing we try to do is, and it gets back into developing the relationship that I was talking about, that we try to have in the rapport at the outset, being able to sit down and talk to them. And we look for people that we think that are coachable. We will try to do it from our standpoint, say, listen, we've seen this done, it just hasn't worked. The biggest thing that we bring to a company is not that we're smarter than you are, but we've had just a ton of mistakes made in our portfolios over all the years. So we bring a whole wealth of things that don't work and try to keep you from making those mistakes. The other thing is we really try to encourage the CEO to have a strong board and bring in other people. We don't want to be the only people on the board. And so we want, obviously the management to have a seat on the board, but we want to have, a couple of other outsiders that could bring some real value to the board. And that's one of the real places where you can kind of find a mentor. And that typically, the guy knows that we're in it to make a buck. We're always pushing them to make a buck faster. But if you can get an outside director on it that has some real experience, he can act as a great mentor as a CEO. So I would encourage anybody that's trying to start up a company, before you start to go out and raise money, whether it's an actual board of directors or an advisory board, get some people around you that have done it before and have credibility in the marketplace.
You referred to a couple things here, so I'm going to ask a couple questions here. You can answer them in whatever order you want to. One is syndication, in regards to you're not the only investor in the company. And we've talked about how you're a lead investor versus you're part of the syndicate. And the second piece of this is going back to terms and how you're able to get a seat on the board and other terms that you see in the deals that you're doing of late.
We'll start with the syndication part first. Like with most venture players, we always work in a group or a syndicate. We'll have at least two other players normally in every deal. The old rule of thumb used to be, they needed the Series A round with maybe 3 players. And when you go out to raise the Series B, those 3 players have got to put up 25% of whatever you're going to raise, and you bring in a couple more players. And then when you go to raise the C, that whole group collectively puts up 25, and you go out and you get the other 75 from a couple more players. That's got to be tougher these days. Getting follow-on money is really difficult. So when we put a syndicate together now, we're looking at guys that have enough capability to make at least the first 2, if not the first 3 rounds of financing without bringing in a new player. We always try to bring in a new player, but if we can't, we've got the money around the table. So that's part of the syndicate issue. Lead versus co-lead or participant, we don't get real hung up on that. We're the lead, and either lead or co-lead in probably about half of our deals. Usually that just kind of gravitates to whoever's got the best knowledge of the industry in a lot of cases, and they'll act as the lead. Sometimes it's whoever puts the deal together. But and lead doesn't necessarily mean you're putting in the largest amount of money. We were the lead in a couple different deals where we put in substantially less than some of the other players.
So why was the lead? To get the most knowledge of the deal?
The lead is really more just to try to bring the group together. You need some, we're all looking at so many deals and stuff, and it's just like with the entrepreneur, you got to keep pushing all the time with the VC, because if you're not constantly beating on us, your business plan tends to slide a little bit further down the pile. And it's the same thing when we're working with other VCs. We've got to try to keep everybody corralled and pulled together. So the lead will negotiate the terms and stuff.
Well, speaking about terms, what terms do you see on price, which would be valuation? What terms do you see on end dilution? And so forth?
Well, the valuation is all over the map, depending on the company and the stage of the company. There's no secret method. Unlike some of the guys that teach courses at the university, they talk about all these discount cash flows and all this taking a lot of the financial risk. You know, the entrepreneur isn't really putting up a lot of money. So, you know, if we're all going to, you know, make a lot of money on this thing, you know, it just seems to be fair that we would get our money back. The reason we do preferred rather than common is because, as I said to you earlier, we try to build the infrastructure of the company, and that's how we force that requirement without having a debt instrument. So it doesn't make any difference really whether, when you look at it on a converted basis, we have 10% of the company or 95% of the company. That's why we don't get hung up on 51%. It doesn't make any difference. Our document has all the covenants in there that we think are necessary to build the right foundation to set the business. And so we'll have in there some of the clauses, the covenants is, you know, you have to have an audit, and you got to report monthly to the board, you have to have a budget. Sometimes we'll put a requirement in there about hiring a CEO or a CFO down the road at some point. And we just try to put a lot of the elements into the document to force the company to follow a good clean path. We try to build every company like we're going to take it public, even though we know we're not. But if you're, you know, building on a solid foundation, you got a much better chance for success.
So if an entrepreneur comes in and says, hey, look, you know, I want these terms, how much wiggle room is there for negotiation?
From his standpoint or ours? No, nothing is ever really black and white except for basically the type of document. We just won't do a straight common deal. So there are some things that are non-negotiable. I can remember when I did the deal with Pete did, and he was all hung up on registration rights and stuff. And you know, it's a stupid thing. It's 20-some odd pages in the document, and I told him, I said, Pete, get over it. That's part of it. It's not going to change. Also, I've never seen them used. There's not an underwriter in the world that's going to force you to go public if the CEO doesn't want to go public. But that's one of those things that these things are very important. But you know, some of the areas there are some negotiation is the types of anti-dilution. Generally, in a very early stage company, we have what we call full ratchet anti-dilution. And so, just for you know, ease to explain it, if we paid $1 a share, and then later on you go out and we have to raise you know, the Series B round, and it's at 50 cents a share, then our $1 share converts to 50 cents, and that's what they call a full ratchet. As companies mature a little bit, get a little further along, we go to what we call broad-based weighted average, which the price will still get adjusted down. It just doesn't go all the way. It's based on how much money is invested on the first round and how much you're raising on the new round. Sometimes there are a ratchet if the company's a late mid-stage. Board seats are usually negotiable. You know, we want typically, you know, at least 2 seats on the board. And we try to convince the entrepreneurs that you're much better to have, believe it or not, 2 VCs on your board than 1. Because of personalities and everything else, you might just get sideways with 1. And so if we've got 2 VCs on the board, we'll usually battle it out and resolve the differences so you as the CEO don't have to do that.
3 more questions, Jack, and I'm going to open it up to the floor here. So I'm going to basically let you highlight what you're doing across the state with GLEQ examples. So if you kind of talk about the Grand Lakes Entrepreneur Quest, that would be great, and your involvement in that, or you see that being beneficial to Michigan. The second question is basically, where do you see Kalamazoo in 5 years? And the last question is, you know, let's pick one company in your portfolio, and if you can kind of highlight that company and show some excitement about that, that would be great.
First, as far as the efforts, there's a lot of things going on you know, across the state. I happen to be chairman of the Great Lakes Entrepreneurs Quest, which is all geared towards entrepreneurs. And it's a statewide organization. We run 2 business plan competitions a year. We provide coaches and mentors. I'm also head of judging on that, and so I've got 80-some judges, most of them are VCs, that will review the business plans for the competition and give you comments. But in addition to that, we hold all kinds of little you know, roundtable discussions around the state to let entrepreneurs ask questions. We call it Ask the Investors. we have a whole other types of things like that, events around the state. So that's one thing that we do. We're both, both Pete and I have been involved with all kinds of other business plan competitions at U of M, Wayne State, Michigan State, Notre Dame. Pete's on the board of the Smart Zone up in the UP. We had a hard time finding a BC that would go up to the UP. But so we work with those. We work with a number of the Pete's on the pre-seed fund. So we work a lot with the organizations to try to encourage entrepreneurship. Partly, we both have been very frustrated. We hope to see more deals in Michigan. We don't have any, strings attached to our funds when we've got to do Michigan deals. But clearly, if we get the entrepreneurial juices flowing more in the state, we'd much rather do deals, within 50 miles of Kalamazoo than having to, fly to the West Coast. I loved it when he had Athletic. It's the only time I've ever had a company where I take an elevator to a board meeting. They were in the same building we were in. I mean, that's a perfect deal for us. So we spend a lot of time trying to work with entrepreneurs and different organizations. And then the
second question is, where do you see Kalamazoo in 5 years? The last question was, highlight a company. Maybe you want to highlight Athletica.
I think we've seen a big change, not only in Kalamazoo, but I think in Michigan in general. But when I first came down here, there wasn't really any entrepreneurs. I had a lot of guys trying to start companies because Pfizer had just gone through and pulling out a whole ton of people. The comment I made before I made earlier, when I talking to somebody that when a guy comes out of Pfizer, if he's been a PhD advisor for 25 years, and then he goes, there's probably a good sense that or a good probability he's not an entrepreneur. He wouldn't have been advisor for 25 years. So there was a kind of a big flurry of activity early on that I don't think yielded quite the results everybody expected, but it was some great results. At least we kept a lot of key people and smart people employed in Kalamazoo. But through that whole process, there was a guy out of Chicago, Tom Churchill, that used to come in, and I don't know if anybody here went to the first or second Tuesday, I forgot what he called it. And it was an event that they held out at the SMIC, either the first Tuesday and one to the second Tuesday of every month. And companies got up and talked about their ideas, they talked about venture capital and stuff. So all that's gone to the educational process. So I think we've seen quite a bit of change over time. And there's been now probably at least 6 or 7 companies in Kalamazoo that have raised venture money, not only just from Kalamazoo here, but from Grand Rapids and the other side of the state, and from out of state. So I think things are moving. It's a long, slow process. It doesn't happen overnight. I think the state thought that they could jumpstart this a lot quicker and see results. I think that Southwest Michigan First, when they were really trying to get this stuff going, thought they were going to see a lot more results faster. But it takes a long time to build an infrastructure. And so I think in 10 years we've come a long way, and it only gets faster as it goes from here. So I think over the next 5 years we'll see some nice changes.
Thanks, Jack. I'm going to open it up to the floor here. Any questions that you all have for Jack?
I've just gotten back from a conference in which 2 venture capitalists and 2 angels addressed us, and they were talking about the possibility or the probability that if you're an angel, you're looking at 60 to 70% failure, and that the 30% has to make up the difference. And also the venture capitalist needs to have a multi-million dollar potential, if not right up front, in order to be involved in it. I'm very interested in whether you would second that, and also what do you think about crowdfunding, which, by the way, the SEC just decided today that they're going to issue the rules, at least the potential rules. So those 2 questions.
You sure you want to get me started on crowdfunding?
I have a notion you might. They were very positive about it, that it was going to be additional instead of a competition.
I don't think they bet.
No,
We'll start out with the easier one first, the failure rates. Yeah, I think that from an angel standpoint, I don't know what the national statistics are, but 30% failure is probably higher than that, would be my guess. Part of it is what's your definition of success, too. Yeah, it's very tough for angels to get involved with the company. I mean, they provide a great asset, and it used to be, VCs didn't want to do deals with angels. Well, now that the VC community is shrinking so much, and the angels are actually getting bigger in the amounts of money that they're working with, and they're starting to understand more of the rules and stuff. We don't mind working with angels, but we do. To your second part of that question was we do need the mega $1 million hits because we've got so much money, and in our case, like say our second fund, which is $26 million, and there's just the two of us, and so we can only invest in so many companies. And if we can't invest where we put all that money to work, we end up with a whole lot of money uninvested down the road. And so that's why when we look at medical deals, I mean, it's not uncommon at all for our medical companies to have $50 million, which is well beyond where the angels want to play. So and some angels will come in early, and they won't be able to play along, and so their ownership will actually go down, but they've got a smaller piece of a much bigger pie. But the angels are better for smaller, low capital intensive businesses. In crowdfunding, at the Fish Bio thing, I went around with a couple of guys on that, and the one guy got up and it was a proponent of crowdfunding, and he specifically in medical deals, and he says that the typical medical deal it takes $49.7 million. That part I agreed with. That was pretty close to my number. But then he starts talking about crowdfunding, and that the average investor in crowdfunding is a little over $5,000 or $7,000. Well, divide that into 50 million, and how many people you're going to need in crowdfunding? I mean, the numbers just don't work. And to get a tenth of the way there doesn't do you any good. I think the whole I always refer to that train wreck as the anti-SOX train. It's crowdfunding has gone as far to the left as Sarbanes-Oxley went to the right on over-controlling companies. And the lawyer in this thing at the Fish Bio, he referred to it, he starts talking about iTunes and Apple and all that stuff. None of those companies, Apple wasn't started by crowdfunding. There was a lot of venture money that went in there. And every example he threw out had a lot of venture money in it. And then they started talking about, drug companies. It takes hundreds of millions of dollars to get a drug to market, plus a long, long time. And to me, the crowdfunding thing is just going to be a disaster because people are going to get into them. It's going to take forever. They're not going to get their money back. And I'm not as worried about fraud. And I think there will be a fair amount of fraud in the crowdfunding area. But it's mostly, I think, it's going to be just disillusioned investors.
It wasn't legal before, You can't do equity crowdfunding.
Right.
Yeah.
Consumer stuff, like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, where you can kind of pre-buy something if the guy thinks he's going to make something. Yeah, that's a crapshoot, and that's fine. And it's more of a game. But if you're really thinking you're getting into it, to make money, I just don't see how they're going to control it. I mean, we spend way too much time trying to work with our companies. And as a venture capitalist, I don't want to get involved with a company that's got 500 shareholders already involved with it. There's just too much chance for litigation. We spend a lot of time amending documents and changing them to give the company more flexibility because the business moves. And we got to go around to the other VCs and convince them to amend the agreement. There may be 3 or 4 or 5 of us. How are you going to go out to 500 people and say, hey, we got to change these documents?
Since we're on the topic of crowdfunding, have you ever, as a venture capitalist, considered going in and swooping in on an idea on Indiegogo that you could see potential in? Have you guys ever considered something like that?
First off, I'm not sure I like the word swooping in. We're venture capitalists, not vulture capitalists. Actually, no. I mean, I don't think I've ever been on Indiegogo myself. We want to try to, we have enough entrepreneurs coming to us with ideas and want to build companies. And again, like I said, I don't really want to get involved with something that's got, 500 shareholders out there.
If my math is right, your first fund is right at that kind of 12-year mark for sunsetting. Are you raising a second fund, or have you? Or?
We already have.
Okay, you already.
Yeah, you run these in parallel. So we've had the second fund. We've got 6 companies in the second fund. So once you get to there's a sunset period in there where you can only do new deals because everybody knows it's going to take a long time for these to mature. So over the first 5 or 6 years is when you lay down your initial bets. And then after that, you're doing follow-on financing. So once we get all of our initial bets down, then we can start another fund and start putting initial bets down on there. And like when I was at Pathfinder one time, we had 3 funds open at one time.
So you guys just have 2, and you're currently working on the second one.
Right.
And how much of the capital in the second one's deployed?
We've drawn down 50% right now. Invested just about that, a little bit of cash.
Other questions?
Using very rough general numbers, percents, how much equity do you like to control in the company if it's a small outfit with a good idea that you like to do?
You talk about us or the syndicate?
Well, either one.
Okay. I generally, the syndicate, it all gets down to trying to figure out what a pre-money valuation is. We don't have any preconceived terms. Sometimes, we'll have a relatively small percentage. Again, like I said earlier, the controls are not by ownership. It's through all the document and the requirements that the board is going to make the long-term decisions. But if I had to pick a number, we're someplace generally, in the 18-20% going in for our fund, and usually when we exit, we'll be in probably the 3 to 5%. So, we've raised a lot more money. The syndicate, usually at an A round, we may get up to where we've got, the whole group might have 40% or something. But we want to make sure that there's enough equity available there, because if the entrepreneur isn't happy, we can't show him a path to being rich, we're not going to make money.
Like to follow up for your businesses, how much depend on a product? How much are more of a business that's doing and providing a service?
Generally, we prefer product, companies of one sort or another. We have some services companies. We've got a specialty staffing company that's all services. The in-stadium one that we were talking about, we had kind of proprietary product early on, but now we're selling digital media, which is really more of a service than a product. Minute Clinic was clearly a service. We didn't have a product there at all. But generally, we try to we gravitate towards things that you can grab a hold of and have a product.
You mentioned.
Yeah, you were coming through.
Hello.
Yep.
You mentioned that you invested heavily into the labor company that didn't do too well. How did you go about bouncing back from such a big loss?
We didn't. There was, we ended up selling that company to Biomet, and Dane Miller down there, the CEO of Biomet, probably could have written that check out of his own account. So, no, there was probably, I would guess that was altogether the VCs that never lost 20-something million on that one. But we've had others that we've lost a lot more in, over the years.
You mentioned that your team currently manages really has a limitation on the number of deals you can manage because of the size of the team, 2 people. And I'm curious, do you feel like that team size is limited by the access to capital to raise more in order to be able to support more management, or is that just a structural choice that you guys just decide that's where you want to be?
Yeah, that's a structural choice that we made. We work together well. I tell people, we haven't quite figured that out yet. Why screw it up and bring somebody else in? I mean, we're not sure what we'd go look for. I went through that with my firm I had up in Minneapolis. We started out that there was 4 of us as partners early on, and we got up to 9. And I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I know 9 is the wrong answer. It's too many people to make a decision, especially if you're doing early stage deals. And this just seems to be a nice fit.
There's a lot of people in the room that are interested in software and software as a service businesses. And you mentioned it's a smaller percentage, but can you speak to any software businesses that you've invested in or exits that you've had?
Over the years, I mean, I've been involved with with a lot of different software deals, and one of the big changes in the industry is getting to the point now where everything is all done on the cloud, and it's so much easier to develop software. That's what's making it tough for us to get involved. When I was first doing software deals, it was huge, multi-million lines of code, for like CAD software running on big supercomputers and things like that. Well, we didn't have to worry about a competitor, and we knew we were going to get a lot of money in it, because it took a long time to develop. It was all on the same version, and so the cost of getting into the business has made it hard for us to get it.
So it's harder to be in those deals. So you're in those deals less than you used to be, you think?
Yeah, a lot less. I mean, back especially in the early and mid '80s, there was a lot of software, and then up through the bubble, and then went into the .com when that first came out. When the .coms first came out, everybody thought it was a horse race. They just threw millions and millions of dollars in marketing at things. People realized that the greater fool theory only goes so far. So it's just hard for us to put enough money out.
Yeah, did you want me to just speak up? So you did mention the geographic location of Kalamazoo was a draw and a benefit. Can you go into a little bit more about why you came to Kalamazoo? Because you relocated, and
Now you sound like my wife.
if you were going to do it again, would you do it again now with what you see for the future of Kalamazoo?
It'd be a lot easier to do it today than it was when we did it. Early on, a couple things that drove it, was one, the proximity to a lot of what we thought was some really, good opportunity in the Midwest. In retrospect, I think that the biggest mistake that we made when we raised our fund is we thought the entrepreneurial community was further along in Michigan than it really was. Fortunately, by the time we start Fund 3, it'll be beyond where we thought it was when we started Fund 1, so it'll make it easier from that standpoint. And I think it's very important that both of us are in the same office. It's hard to evaluate people over the phone. You got to sit down and be with them. So that's what all kind of led to finding here.
So did you just see kind of a void here of BC?
Well, there was that, but Pete lived here in Kalamazoo, and the first group of investors that had approached him about trying to set up a venture fund and stuff, we're from the Kalamazoo area. We've got investors in, 8 or 9 states, so we're not, Michigan's combined by any means, but we are Midwest focused, even though we screw that up every once in a while.
for us young entrepreneurs, I've only been in, I'd say, 8 months, where I even started having ideas. You favor an age group that you invest in, such as 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, or do you favor more people with more experience? And if you do favor an age group, do you think other venture capitalists wouldn't, or would it be more you look at just simply the business model?
I've invested in companies. I had a very successful company that when we backed the guy who was 19, we ultimately, I think he had either 12 or 13 venture funds in that deal. And built a beautiful business, sold it to a public company. So, age is not an issue so much. It's more what we look at. It gets back to what I said earlier about the passion. And then the other thing is we want to see somebody involved with a company that's done it before. So in this case, where the guy was 19, shortly after we got involved and he ended up wanting to do it, we brought in, this was an Illinois-based company, and we brought in senior management that every one of them was probably at least twice as old as he was, and brought them in from all over the country. So as long as you got the drive and the desire to make the company successful and do what it takes and have the passion for the business, we don't get real hung up on age. If anything, it goes the other way. I mean, we've seen guys, he worked at one, instead of my entrepreneurs, we refer to them as our entrepreneurs. The husband and the wife that were involved in that thing were in their 80s when we looked at it. Now, the problem with that is you look at that and you think, one, are they going to live to exit? And two, are they going to really have the drive? So if anything, we tend to get a little cooler as you get older. Because usually by the time, if the guy's been successful and an entrepreneur at 60 or 65, we're afraid, well, is he getting ready to start, backing off? And, are we going to back a half-time CEO? So, but if you're younger, you need somebody around you that's done it before.
I understand that there's about maybe 3 to 5% of the propositions that are given to you as possible deals. What would you suggest the other 90% of people that have ideas do when they're turned down by the angels and the VCs?
There's a variety of alternatives out there. One is just do whatever it takes to get some traction and go back. Just because you get turned down once doesn't mean it's game over. As I said earlier, MinuteClinic, I looked at that and then turned it down. One of our deals that we've got in our second fund, I turned down for a 4-year period several times. But so if you can't get the money that you need today, figure out a way of doing it, whether it be a credit cards or friends and family or whatever, to try to get some traction and don't give up. So get used to people saying no. Secondly, just because one VC turns you down doesn't mean it's a crappy idea. If a drug dealer walks into my shop, we're going to turn it down, and it doesn't make any difference whether it looks like it's going to cure cancer or not. We just don't do drug deals, and so every VC has certain areas of things that they just don't do for one reason or another. So you want to try to do your homework and find somebody that is geared towards what you're trying to do. The nice thing about Michigan too, there's a lot of, as with many states in the Midwest, they're all trying to help to encourage entrepreneurship. And so there are funds that are funded here in Michigan that are funded by the MEDC and the state that have to invest. They can only invest in Michigan. So those guys are willing to take a little bit more risk and hands-on work because they know they're only going to have to drive an hour to the company instead of flying halfway across the country. So, figure out where you fit and try to find some little niches like that. Depending on what the product is, there may be an SBIR grant or some other kind of grant out there that can get you part way. There's a lot of options and alternatives and to getting money. And one of my comments that Pete's always made, the easiest place, the best place to get money is through revenue. Sell something.
I just wondered what you do to help prepare the entrepreneur for the day after you've written your check, and suddenly a board is a real thing, and a budget is a real thing, and they don't have the power they used to. What do you do to help them?
A lot of that, you go through the whole process, and so they get kind of used to it. Because normally before we even get involved, we'll work with them to have the next year's budget or the balance of this year. If it's early in the year, he probably doesn't have a plan. So he's already been through the whole planning process with us and the budgeting side. There's always surprises at the board meeting, and you can never prepare them for it. But it's kind of like marriage. You get surprised. You go to bed and next morning you wake up and you start over. You keep it going. So there's not much that we can do except just try to work with them.
Well, you're sort of stuck too, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like I said earlier on. Unless you make money, we're not going to make any money. I can't think of a deal where the VCs came out making money and the entrepreneur didn't get anything. It's because we're equity investors. It's pretty much the same. And if we're selling it off at a fire sale, we're both losing money. And you're just losing time and stuff. We're losing real dollars.
Is there anyone here that has not taken a nugget away that'd like to ask a question? So you mentioned that you do competitions like the GLEQ. Do entrepreneurs who participate in the GLEQ competitions or competitions in general have any kind of favorite to your organization?
I'm sorry, ask it again.
So do entrepreneurs who participate in these competitions, would they have any kind of preferential treatment versus other entrepreneurs who participate?
They do sometimes from a health standpoint. Responsibility. The value of going through any one of the competitions or the GLEQ or whatever is the fact that you get feedback as you're going through the process, and so hopefully you've got a better plan when you come into us. Through that process, we will spend more time with the companies and try to help them and stuff. That doesn't relate necessarily in the dollars into the company.
Jack is going to be around here. He's going to hang out and mingle with y'all, so we want to give him a big hand. Thank you very much. Stay around. You got more food. You got Jack to talk to. You have other people in the community to talk to. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.